Well, hello everyone, welcome back to Dprieto TV, and we are back with Prietology. We got a good episode today. It's our final of our geography episodes, part 3 of our geography, here in season 4, where we're talking about earth science thus far. Episode 4, we're already halfway through this season. The Waterworks is our episode today. Water forms, rivers, deltas, oceans, lakes. We got a good amount of stuff to talk about today. At the end of the video, I'm going to give more details about the upcoming fall break vacation, which is coming on for you guys. It will be published on October 15th. More details about that at the end of the video. So yeah, let's waste no more time. Let's go over the key terms. Alright, we got a good amount of episodes today. Let me move to this side. We got 9 of them today. We're just at the limit. Remember, for every episode now on forwards for Prietology, the max is going to be 10 terms per episode. We got 9 of them today. Water, river, delta, lake, ocean, tide, glacier, ice cap, and the god of all of our geography stuff that we've been talking about thus far, erosion. That is going to be a big topic to cover today. So yeah, let's begin. I also forgot to mention when I was reviewing the terms, we have a demo today, and that's going to be like in the middle of our episode somewhat. So yeah, get excited for that. Before we talk about any of these terms, we got to talk about what water forms and the waterworks are made of. They're made of water, the crucial element of life. It controls all life processes. Every single form of life in the universe needs water. It covers 70% of the earth, so that includes oceans, seas, rivers, lakes, deltas, ice caps, glaciers. All the stuff we're going to talk about today. 70% of the earth is water, and that can be determined into like salt water and fresh water. In liquid form, it can make rivers and oceans, and in solid forms, it can make glaciers and ice caps. In gas form, we can make clouds and winds, clouds and thunderstorms, and basically all the weather that governs our planet. Fun fact about water, Earth has, let's see if I'm making this right, 326 million cubic miles of water. So imagine a 1 by 1 by 1 mile cube. So a cube that's 1 mile this way, 1 mile that way, and 1 mile up. There's 326.28 million of those cubes in the world. That is how much water there is in the world. Alright, let's move on to the second term. I would say this term is as important as your liver. That is not an empty threat. It's just because it's so important. This is going to be a crucial term in our episode today. So we have river. Rivers are pathways made by water that erode the land around them. So imagine little pathways of water going down mountains from rain, the rain that comes down the mountains, a water cycle. Yeah, we're going to talk about the water cycle later in the season. They erode the path they go on. So wherever path they go on, they're breaking up the rock and basically transporting it. And the rivers, with that eroded rock, transport sediment along its current. So all that, if you see like little pebbles and little like tiny little rocks floating along rivers, those are sediments that can be crucial to some forms of life. Require sediments. Basically, these are just kind of like eroded rock that are carried by the river. During these rivers, small little rivers called rivulets can join a main river down its path downhill, and then rivers can also start waterfalls. So if a river runs off a cliff, then it's called a waterfall. And the rivulets are the ones that join the main river and essentially make up one big river, so kind of like an inverse delta. We'll talk about delta in a bit. Fun fact about rivers and rivulets: about 0.0001, about 1/10,000% of the Earth's water is in rivers. That's how much other water is concentrated in oceans and seas. And the sky sometimes, because sometimes the sky, yes, all those clouds that are right above you right now, those are made of water. We'll talk about clouds later in another episode. Term number 3, and this also goes along with river. I said we'd talk about it in a bit. Well, here it is, deltas. These are made up of one or more rivers, and these also, essentially, they're muddy little islands between rivers. So if a river basically kind of like, it branches off into multiple rivers like a tree. And like I said, they're separated by muddy islands, and they're essentially different channels of rivers. There are 2 types of deltas that we need to know. Arcuate, which is a more triangular shape. So imagine our river here, and let's say my hand is the delta. Basically, I'm going to go like that. and separate it into multiple pathways into more of a triangular shape. The other type is called bird's foot. It's not super splitting. it doesn't split as much. It kind of goes into little crevices. We'll show you in the demo that we're going to do in a bit. So yeah, arcuate and bird's foot, those are the ones that we need to know. These are made from soft sediment that rivers carry down a main body of water. So when sediment piles up, like I said, these are also made from rivers that carry too much sediment. So when sediment piles up in a river, you have delta, the water can't go for the piled up sediment, it goes around and then you make a delta, and then multiple piles of sediment make multiple multiple deltas, and you have a main delta coming from a river. Then they split off into multiple channels. Fun fact about delta, the largest in the world is the Ganges Delta in India, made from the Ganges River in India as well, and there's multiple rivers I think in India as well. Yeah. 40,540 square miles. That's a lot. That is a lot of square miles. Basically, like I said, a 1 by 1 square mile, that's a lot. And also thinking about it, it's kind of like multiple pathways, so basically all the pathways are 40,000 square miles. Hey, you awake? Because you need to be, for this next term, it's lake. A body of water that is completely surrounded by land. If you remember last episode, we talked about peninsula, which is a body of land completely surrounded by water. Essentially, this is the same. It's a body of water completely surrounded by land. That is a lake. It can be the main body of water that rivers go to or come from in rivers. So rivers either come from or go to lakes. So basically, if water runs down from a lake, you got a river. If a river runs to a lake, then you also got a lake. It's going to the lake. These can either be salt or freshwater. So you either got saltwater lakes or freshwater lakes. Some animals can't survive in freshwater lakes, and some animals can't survive in saltwater. Usually they're very calm. They're very calm. Not many storms on them. The stormy ones are the oceans, and we'll talk about why oceans are stormy next in I think next episode. Yeah, and usually these underground lakes, and yes, there are lakes underground, they are called aquifers. Aquifers are essentially giant holes in the ground, like giant caves that are flooded to make a lake. So basically it's flooded on all sides. It's covered with land on all sides. While, like, let's say we have a lake here on the earth, on land in pure sunlight, it's surrounded by land like this, but caves are surrounded by lands in all directions. But the aquifers are surrounded by land in all directions. Fun fact, the Dead Sea is not a sea, it's a lake, and it is the saltiest in the world. It is completely surrounded by land, which classifies it as a lake. Same with also another place called the Sea of Galilee. Not actually a sea, it's a giant lake, but it's considered a lake because it's completely surrounded by land. Dead Sea, saltiest in the world. You can float in it easy if you weigh a lot, you can still float in it. That's how much salt is in. Alright, you want to know what the commotion is in the world? It usually comes from oceans. They contain 97% of Earth's water. That is a staggering amount. All the other Earth's water is located in rivers, lakes, deltas, ice caps, glaciers, and the one we just learned about, aquifers. All that contains 3% of the Earth's water, but the rest comes from our 5 oceans. The Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian, the Arctic, and the usually forgotten one that no one remembers, the Southern Ocean. The 5 oceans of the world. A lot of these weather patterns, like rain, hurricanes, clouds, fronts, I'll talk about that later in the season, they come from the ocean. And if you think about the names Pacific, it's kind of Pacific means like it's peaceful. Paci is like the root for the word peace. So it's the peaceful ocean. The Atlantic Ocean is essentially the opposite of the Pacific. It ain't so peaceful. All the storms and hurricanes, if you think about it, hurricanes usually come from the Atlantic. You never usually hear of hurricanes coming from the Pacific. They come from the Atlantic, through the Caribbean, and then to places like Florida and Mexico. Fun fact, the smallest ocean in the world, actually, if you remember, the biggest ocean in the world is Pacific. It's essentially almost half of the world. The smallest one is the Arctic. It's not the Southern, because literally the Southern encompasses all of Antarctica. It's the entire circumference of Antarctica. Arctic is usually kind of just Russia and Canada. That's it. It's not usually surrounding an entire continent. It's a little bit. It's just Russia and Canada, really, that the Arctic Ocean surrounds. Alright, let's do our demo, and then we'll keep going on our terms. Alright, so we have the kinetic sand again for our demo, and yeah. First, I'm going to make a riverbed. If you remember what a riverbed is, well, I didn't talk about what a riverbed is. It's basically the land where a river is formed, so all that eroded material, that makes up the riverbed. I'm going to make our river. Well, actually, let's make the river like this. Let's make it not too wide. Here we have our river. It's a crack. It's essentially like a pathway of water. As you can see, the land right by the river is more eroded. It's more broken up and all that stuff. Like this stuff, sand, well, it's not actual kinetic sand, but sand like this can be found usually at the bottom of a river, more sediment and broken up like that. Deltas are, remember, river channels that are like broken up. So remember, we have two types of deltas. So let me make our river a little more smaller. And remember, let's make our river actually a little more wider. Remember what a delta is. It's pieces of sediment. So let's say we have a delta. This is our sediment that breaks up. And now, as you see, we already have two types of rivers. We have sediment that goes like that. We already have two rivers formed. And then those sediments can be broken up into more. So it can go like that. Like they can be broken up into smaller rivers. And smaller rivers like that. See, they get broken up and broken up. And usually, remember, we have two types, arcuate and bird's foot. Arcuate ones, let's say the sand is the shape of our river. Arcuate ones are usually a bit wider, but then go into more of a triangular shape at the bottom. So we have our river here, and it spreads out more like that, like that, like that. As you see, each sand pathway that I'm making, those are kind of like more channels. So as you see, it's more triangular shaped, while a bird's foot would be more smaller, but would be wider, would be longer, but it would be smaller. So let me remake our river. Let's say our sand represents the river itself. It's more longer. As you can see, it's more longer. And it has smaller deltas like this. It's shaped like a bird's foot. Guess why it's called bird's foot? And as you can see, it kind of reminds me, like when I think of it, it kind of reminds me of like a webbed foot. So yeah, it's kind of like that. Okay, let's make our lake. Alright, so we have our landform. Let's take a bit out. So we have our lake here, and remember, a lake is land completely surrounded by water, and you see that the eroded land, usually by the coast, as we learned what a coast is last time, is usually more eroded, even though a lake is more calm. And yeah, that's it. Alright, let's go back to our terms. We are on our 6th term, so let's go back to the lesson. Alright, we are at term number 6. Hope you like the demo. Tide. This one's a little more complex. It's movement of water that is altered by the moon's gravity. So if you heard the moon was like, well, some people say it's like fake or like it's not real. But like, hey, the moon alters the Earth's gravity, makes the waves, it makes the tide go round. It actually does. The moon's gravity, I don't know if you can see it, but the moon's gravity is not an actual moon, has influence on our Earth. The gravity of it messes with the oceans and makes the tides. At night, water is dragged towards the moon, so the tide is higher. The tide is higher towards the Earth because the moon is shining directly on the Earth. When the moon and the sun are on the same side of the Earth, the gravitational pull is double, resulting in something called a spring tide. Double lows, which basically means like they're neither on the same side, those are called neap tides. Neap and spring, basically double high. The tides are double high, or the neap tides, or the tides are double low. Basically, they're almost non-existent versus literally flash floods and who knows what the heck. Usually these tides affect the waves on like the shores and stuff, weather patterns. Tide is a massive influence on water and weather patterns. We'll talk about weather patterns later in the season. Fun fact, the Mediterranean Sea, remember it's not completely surrounded by water, and the Caribbean Sea, which is in the Americas, they almost have no tide. If you look at videos of them, they're usually very calm. The Mediterranean has no really major storm systems that go through there every year. The Caribbean does. Those are called hurricanes. And if you've seen the water of the Caribbean, it's usually very clear, very, very serene. It's usually super clear, the Caribbean water, if you've been there. Oh boy, the Atlantic Caribbean area, the Yucatan Peninsula water, it is incredibly clear. I recommend going to see it. Alright, we got 3 more terms to go. Alright, we are almost done. Now we've talked about some of the liquid water forms. Let's talk about some of our solid water forms. The first of them, glacier. Glaciers are U-shaped ice carvings inside mountains. So if you ever seen places like, usually Scandinavia has them, so like Norway, Sweden, Finland, giant carvings of ice in rocks that fill the mountain. So basically it fills crevices inside the mountains, and you have glaciers. It usually starts when snow fills up a valley, like an empty valley, and it compacts into ice. It compacts over a long time with weather patterns and stuff. As I said multiple times, we'll talk about weather in a later season, in a later episode. We'll talk about it in a later episode. So essentially, it's compacted ice. It starts sliding down the valley, carving out even more rock, making even more U-shaped like this. It's kind of like imagine like a bowl, like a U-shaped bowl like this, or a half-open cylinder, and you pour sand into it. That's kind of like what it is. It's just filled with snow, and it makes a glacier. Fun fact, the fastest moving glacier in the world, I don't know where it is or what it's called, it moves 367 feet a day. That is a lot. And usually right now with all this climate change and global warming going on, these glaciers are melting at a rapid rate. Basically all these U-shaped carved rock phenomenon, cool looking things, they're going away because of climate change. So yeah. Let's solve climate change, people. We got our penultimate term coming up. Alright, we have our penultimate term, and I'll tell you, this one is no cap. Ice caps. Ice sheets that freeze over liquid water. So it's kind of like what we've been talking about. Solid plus liquid. You got an ice cap. Liquid water underneath and a thin sheet of ice. Ice caps. They freeze in the winter, so usually in places like the Arctic, subarctic, and Antarctica. They freeze in the winter and then melt in the summer back into water. Global warming unfortunately contributes to the melting of these ice caps, which is something we're going to talk about next episode, so get ready for that. With increasing global warming, a lot of these ice caps are melting more rapidly, and sometimes they don't really freeze that much in the winter. They melt more rapidly in the summer. Fun fact about these ice caps, they hold over 98%! More than 98% of the world's fresh water. And these ice caps are usually over oceans. So when these ice caps melt, you're wasting almost fresh water only to be let out into salt water, essentially ruining the fresh water. So yeah, that's why melting ice caps are a big concern, because those contain a lot of fresh water. And some of the animals that live in the ice caps, in the ice cap regions, can't usually live in fresh water, and well, they die. Alright. We got one more term to go, and it's a good one. Oh boy, we got an excellent term to close out the episode. We have talked about it. We have mentioned it for the past 3 episodes, and we've talked about longitude, latitude, landforms, and now we finally get to talk about, to wrap up our geography portion of the season, erosion. It breaks up the land and shapes it. Water, wind erosion. Sometimes geological erosion from lava flows. Erosion of time, like when things wear out over time. Water, wind erosion, I've already said that already. It breaks up the land, shapes it the way we have. The coasts are shaped like they are. Plateaus are shaped like they are. Mountains are shaped what they are. Volcanoes, lava flows, rivers, deltas, oceans, tides, glaciers, ice caps. All of that. Rivers and water forms and landforms all contribute to erosion. Everything we've talked about all comes back to this. Yeah, erosion. That's erosion for you. It breaks up the land, shapes it, and how we usually have our Earth, how our Earth is shaped and our continent, that is because of erosion. Fun fact, the easiest rocks to erode, limestone, which is kind of fragile. It's a little fragile rock. I forget what it is on the most scale. And mudstone. It kind of ends in their name. Mud is soft, and so it's easier to erode. It's like dried mud. So yeah, it's kind of more easier to erode than something like diamond. Well, you can't erode diamond. You need another diamond to break a diamond, but you get the point. Alright, let's go to our announcements. We got some good ones today. It's about the travel video coming soon. Alright, lesson finished. I hope you enjoyed the demo. It was a cool one. Alright, let's get into announcements. Next episode, which is going to be on, I think, November-ish or near the end of October. It is the penultimate episode, the second to last episode of Season 4. Wow. We're already almost done with another season of Prietology. Yeah, we're almost done with that, and that will be the penultimate episode of Season 4. More details about that in a little bit. The 2022 fall break vacation is coming soon. Next week is the last video. The next video I will make will be the last video before the vacation video, and it will be Turmoil number 3. We're playing Turmoil again. We are back with gaming, coming out October 2nd, so get excited for that. We'll be traveling to New York, Albany, and Boston in the northeast of the U.S. We're going there for the first time. We are traveling from October 6th to the 12th. So probably like I did for the summer vacation, I'll upload some shorts, probably about like 2 or 3 maybe, about what we're doing in Albany and Boston, maybe some cool sights. So that's going to be uploaded then. The video itself, it's not going to be a premiere this time. The 2022 fall break vacation will be uploaded on October 15th. It is usually a Saturday, and usually I upload on Sundays, but this time it will upload on a Saturday on October 15th. So don't forget that. Vacation video on October 15th. Next video, like I said, will be turmoil number 2, the last video before the vacation. Alright, now concerning back to Prietology, the next episode will be about weather. We are done with geography. We are talking about weather now. The water cycle, clouds, precipitation, hail, thunderstorms, tornadoes, seasons, climate change, greenhouse effects. We got a lot to talk about. That's probably going to come after the vacation video, so near the end of October-ish, maybe October 20s-ish. Yeah, expect Prietology season 4, episode 5, all about weather and weather forms and how they affect our geography landforms that we've talked about so much. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I will see you for turmoil number 3 on October 22nd in 2 weeks. So yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. See ya.